from wherever you might be watching us from. Welcome back again to this special broadcast that is brought to you courtesy of the Ictj and partners. And of course, as we've done in the past couple of weeks, we would invite guests here from, the Ictj and their partners to discuss about issues relating to the Gambia's transitional justice, but of course with a special focus on women victims and the importance of having them come out to take part in this very important process, and also with regards to the TRRC recommendations that we're expecting at the end of the Commission's mandate. So this week again, here with me in the studio, I have guests from ANACED and the Victim Center, but I would let them introduce themselves. They are not actually new to some of you out there. And then we would kickstart the discussion as usual. Let me start with the one on my immediate right.
Thank you very much, Ansumana. My name is Sirandao. I am the country representative for the African Network Against Extrajudicial Killings and Enforced Disappearances, ANACED. ANACED is an organization that advocates for victims of enforced disappearances and summary executions. We work in the Gambia here, and we also have partners that we work with in Ghana and other African countries that we partner with, including Senegal. Okay. And that's what we do. We're happy to be here.
So we would delve a bit into ANACED and the work that you do, as well as the Victim Center. But let me bring in Isa as well to say hi to the audience out there. These are familiar faces, like I said, but yes.
Thank you very much. So my name is Ictj, but fondly called Aisha Jame. I work with the Victim Center, the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations, and the Victim Center also work with victims of human rights violations, those whose rights have been violated during the 22 years rule dictatorship. And then we advocate for the victims as well, provide psychosocial support to victims, and also create a platform for them to address some of the issues that they have regarding the violation that happened to them.
All right, so there you have it. They will help us guide this discussion today. And of course, our discussion would focus mainly on women and transitional justice, but with a special focus on victims' reparations, women victims. I mean, the importance of also having them included in the TRRC's reparations recommendations at the end of the day. But let me bring in Auntie Sarah now to tell us a bit more about ANACED and the work that you do.
Yes, Ansumana. The work we started back in 2018. That's when early 2019, we work on the transitional justice process, primarily with the TRRC hearings, the public hearings. ANACED summarizes the victim testimonies, the witness testimonies rather. We found a gap that for people to get back on what has been testified, what witnesses have testified, it's very challenging. You have to sit back and listen to hours and hours of videos. So what ANACED does is to summarize the testimonies of every witness that has appeared from the TRRC for each session. We put that into a publication called the TRRC Digest, and each publication is released after the session ends and published out there. It is also translated into the 4 main local languages: Wolof, Mandinka, Jola, and Fula, and aired on the community radios, because we believe that the rural Gambia is a very important part of the transitional justice process and must be kept informed at all time, and preferably as much first-hand information as possible. Typically, very few people have time to listen to hours and hours of video or radio during the session, and let alone to catch up later on. So we found that gap, which we've been working on since the beginning of the transitional justice, the TRRC rather. We've also done other work in the area of supporting victims in filing suits against the victims that want to pursue justice. We have filed 4 cases right now with the ECOWAS Court of Justice. Victims trying to get their rights addressed, given the process that we are in, and all the necessary elements that must work in tandem. We don't necessarily have to wait for the Truth Commission to come up with a recommendation. There are various mechanisms in the transitional justice process that includes prosecution. So we have supported a few victims that have come across, that we work with in those processes. We recently concluded a workshop on forensic investigations, supporting victims, especially of enforced disappearances, and the stakeholders in coming together, because we found that there was a big gap between the victims and the stakeholders, especially the TRRC, where in terms of communication. Victims are left in the dark about what is happening to the remains of their loved ones, where the process is in terms of finding the remains of their loved ones, and the challenges we know that the government is facing, especially the TRRC, which is currently mandated to search for remains.
Yeah.
So we brought them together. This was a couple of weeks ago. Aisha was part of that process. We brought them together to look at, you know, what are the issues, what are the challenges, what are the gaps, and how do we resolve and move forward. And we expect them to come up with recommendations that we hopefully would be able to share with the country for the way forward. These are some of the work that ANACED involves, and we also have memorialization project, a permanent memorialization center that is coming up soon. We're hoping to launch in the next few months.
Great.
Some of the work that ANACED
your organization have already set the ball rolling as far as supporting victims to get justice is concerned.
Yes.
So what other organizations are you partnering with? Are you working with?
We work very closely with the Victim Center, of course. As ANACED is a victim-led organization, so we are victims. So we are by virtue of that, we are registered with the Victim Center. We work very closely with the Victim Center. We work with WAVE. We work with other organizations that are in the transitional justice process globally. In Senegal, we work with we have collaborated with the Amnesty International, and we have some CSOs that we collaborate with in Ghana, and we of course work with the other NGOs, the supporting NGOs like the UNDP and other agencies that are in the country. So we definitely work across the board with different institutions depending on the type of projects we have. Our TRRC Digest, for example, is in partnership with the Point newspaper.
Okay.
So we definitely, collaboration is a key. This is an institute. This is a process that nobody can do it alone. The government cannot do it alone. All the partners, the victims, the stakeholders, the public need to come together. So we definitely don't look to work on our own. We are always looking for partnerships, and depends on the type of project we work on and the stakeholders that we also, our collaboration include working with the Minister of Justice at times, who were part of the workshop that I just mentioned earlier, and so forth. So definitely specifically make sure that our projects are in partnership with other organizations that are relevant to the current project that we'll be working on.
Great. So Aisha, when we talk about the transitional justice process, the first thing that comes to mind is the victims.
Yeah.
And one organization that is also at the forefront of, this fight to ensure that victims get justice, to ensure that they are supported, is the Victim Center. Tell us a bit more about your organization.
Thank you again, Ansumana. I think Antisira had said how we collaborated with ANACED as well. So basically, the Victim Center, when we started in 2017, our main work that we're doing was documenting human rights violations, because we feel that these stories need to be documented. So we started documenting these cases, and then we were able to get a database to a project through the German funding. So this database was an online, it's a clouded database where we will go into the field, because as part of our work is not just centered around the Combes here. So we travel as far as Basse, Koina, all the way to Koina, because victims are all over the country. So we take cases of all these victims. As long as you feel that your rights were violated by the former regime, we document your case and then we put it in the database. So when we had this database, then the TRRC has not yet started its work. So when the TRRC started, we had an MOU with the TRRC basically to share this documented cases that we have with the TRRC. Since we don't have the mandate to further investigate these cases, but TRRC has the mandate to. So we share these cases we have in our database with the TRRC. So that is one work that we've done since we started. And we also partner with all the organizations that are working on transitional justice in the Gambia. So ANACED is one, which is basically working on extrajudicial execution and enforced disappearances, where we have registered victims that extrajudicial executions and enforced disappearance. So we also share this information with stakeholders like ANACED, and also we partner with basically all the organizations that are working on transitional justice processes. So psychosocial support as well is one key thing that we do at the Victim Center, which we know it's important, because all these victims whose rights have been violated are traumatized in a way. So psychosocial support is something that helps trauma victims to recover from their trauma. And we all know trauma is a process, healing is a process, and we put them through this psychosocial support service which will help them to be able to accept what had happened to them. Because if you are being victimized, you as an individual need to accept what happened to you before you go through that healing process. So all these are things that we do to engage victims as well, creating this platform for them to be able to address whatever happened to them. Yeah, so thank you.
All right, so the main highlight of our discussion today would center around reparations. We know that the TRRC's mandate will soon end, and it is expected to come up with recommendations rather at the end of the day. And an integral part rather of these recommendations would be on reparations for victims. So our focus would be on the importance of having women victims also included in these recommendations for reparations. Let me start with Antisira first.
Yes, I mean, one of the key things that the Gambia government did when the new government did when they came into power with the TRRC was make sure that recommendations was part of the truth-seeking process. You can see that with the name, the Truth, Reconciliations and Reparation Commission, and I believe that was a deliberate act. So there's definitely the intention for reparations to happen in terms of the victims and the violations that they suffered. So definitely the TRC has been working on that, and they have been working on also the reparations policies and procedures. I believe I was part of I attended one of the validation workshop on the reparations policies and procedures that was put together by the TRC. They have been working on that. I know that the COVID situation has caused some delays because I believe the intention was for them to have the reparations start in September formally. But notwithstanding, we know that reparations have been going on with the health support that our victims have been having, and also some other support in terms of education for some of the victims and the family members of the victims, their kids going to school, and other forms of reparations have been happening, including community reparation as well. You've seen people from the general public coming out and supporting the victims in various ways. So definitely we are on the track for that. When you talk about women victims being included, that is something that we need to be deliberate about, because women are, for the most part, left behind when it comes to these situations in the transitional justice and in justice processes in general, and not just that, economically, socially, and other aspects. So really, it has to be a deliberate effort. In the area where we work with in extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances, women are overwhelmingly the direct secondary victims, so if I must say, because you would see that most of the victims that have been disappeared or extrajudicially killed are men. So they're left behind their wives, their mothers, their grandmothers, and they almost always take on the brunt of whatever happens next. So when it comes to reparations, so even before the reparations, right now, Aisha can attest to that. We are working with so many families that are finding it very hard, and women, most of them women-led families, because the head of the family, the male, is gone. So you're left with grandparents who thought that they were now, going to be sitting and enjoying their elderly status and enjoying their grandkids, are now having to go back and actually look for work or start at other businesses to support their sons' children through school, to support the wives. And wives are finding it very difficult in all of those situations. So women really are overwhelmingly the ones that bear the brunt of the suffering when it comes to economically, socially, and even the trauma that they go through, because you're going through this trauma. So I don't know how it is, Aisha can maybe help us in that. When it comes to getting psychosocial support, they don't even have the time to do that, because you're so much burdened with all of these things. So definitely the reparations need to take into account that aspect of it. And the reparations also in terms of expectations, that has to be really something that needs to the government and the people that are responsible, the TRRC at the moment, and all the people responsible, making sure that the process starts. I think it's a little bit late, but the process should have started a long time ago in terms of really making sure that expectations are managed. Because when we talk about reparation, the first thing that comes to people say is money. How much money am I going to get? And people are, just sitting there and calculate, which is normal, because money really makes the world go around, whether we like it or not. Right? You can be reparated land, you can be reparated, just the memorialization. All of those are forms of reparation. The financial aspect is very important. And from the programs that we have had engagement with the communities, panel discussions. the overwhelming majority are waiting for numbers in terms of how much money is coming
so
into my pocket.
Are really high.
So that really matters. And for the women, it matters most because most of the women are economically disadvantaged even before these incidents happen. Now they have the added weight of losing the primary provider. So becoming the primary provider, by force, and unexpectedly has put a lot of burden on them. And so we really need to be very deliberate about including women and their what considerations are going to be made for women. The other aspect of it is socially. When we have these things, I mean, the person that has been the main victim that has usually been extrajudicially killed or disappeared has a family. So the entire family really is entitled to reparation. Yeah. We socially, when you talk about the family, the digital kilifa and the kilifa always ends up being a man who is out there. When we go out there, when families are being represented, it is the kilifa, the man that comes in, the brother usually, or the father that comes out and is mostly involved and is going through all these processes. Most of the gatherings or events that you see that are addressing these issues, overwhelmingly you see the representation of the families being the male and the women are left behind, not consulted before they come and not communicated to after the event. So those are things that we really need, families especially need to work on as well, because I believe that the woman has as much right to these reparations as any brother or any of the male members of the family, because like I said, overwhelmingly the women bear the brunt of the impact of these victimizations and the violations that have happened in the past.
Aisha,
yeah,
women victims and recommendations for reparations.
I think Auntie Sarah had dealt with most of the things that the expectations of women. I think Auntie Sarah made mention of one important point, which is that women also have the right to these reparations, since they're the ones that got married to this family, in these families, and then they're taking care of the kids of the disappeared. So sometimes we see that family members will represent on behalf of this woman. And they don't communicate back to give the information to say, okay, this was what was discussed at this meeting, and these were some of the recommendations that were made at this meeting. So those are gaps that are happening on these processes that are happening. So I think women needs to be taking the lead in terms of some of those decisions that are being made in the families. And also one thing that we tend to not focus more on is the psychosocial aspect of the impact of what happened to them. Because in our Gambian context, when we talk about psychosocial support, when we talk about therapy, when we talk about counseling, people will tell you that I don't need that. It's not important to my life. I'm not
okay.
I'm not going mad. I'm not going crazy. So these are some of the misconceptions that we have. We working on transitional justice processes are facing, because sometimes if we call most of these women to come for psychosocial support, like Auntie Sarah had said, they have other things as urgent as possible than to come for these psychosocial support therapists. So I think these are gaps that we have, and I think we should be talking about it more to raise awareness around the importance of psychosocial support and therapy to victims, especially women, of human rights violations, because it's very important. Because if you have a peace of mind, you'll be able to, a lot of things will come in place. If your mind is at ease and your mind is at peace, you'll be able to deal with a lot of issues. But if you don't have that peace of mind, you cannot deal with other family issues, your kids here, the violation that had happened to you. So it becomes overwhelming at the end of the day. So I think these are some of the things that women are really facing. And I think it's important that as institutions working on transitional justice, the TRRC as well, which is the main factor here, because they're the ones working on reparations, when we talk about reparations, reconciliations as well. So all of these things, and then you cannot just reconcile with what happened to you when you already have all these existing issues happening in your life. So it becomes a lot. So there's a lot of things happening. So I think we really need to focus on all of these things to ensure that women are in the forefront. If I would say, they should be in the lead. They should be in the forefront to ensure that they have what they deserve, the justice that they deserve, and then also the peace of mind that they deserve, to make sure that the violation that had happened to them would at least reduce. Yeah. So,
talking about women being in the forefront, I mean, women needing to lead. In our discussion last week with the Ictj and the TRRC, one thing that came up is the challenges they're facing in getting women victims to come out and speak, to talk about their experiences. And this, could be, attributed to so many factors, among them the culture of silence, victims being stigmatized, and even within the family level as well. Sometimes they tell you you're a woman, so you cannot speak. We have all of these challenges as well.
Absolutely.
How important is it for women victims also to take part in this transitional justice process? Because for them to be able to have a voice at the end of the day, they have to also take part in this process.
Very, very important, because when you talk about reparations, you're looking for something that really would make that the person would be contented with and would appreciate, right? If you're going to give me something, you want to know, or if you want to appease me, you would want to know how I want to be appeased, right? So it's very important that the women are taken into consideration, because women's needs and men's needs are different, whether we like it or not. That's the situation. So really, for them to come forward or be addressed, in order for it doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be public to come out and be on the stage to do that, because of stigmatization and socially. But really making an effort to go to the woman, because we've talked about some of the challenges that most of these women face. I mean, if I have to juggle cooking lunch and going to the market to sell and thinking about this and that, I would not have time to go to the TRRC. And some of these processes are also quite stressful and traumatizing for them. You're going to these institutions where there's a lot of security around, and some of these people, they have been, what happened to them was done by the security. So they're afraid to face them. And as we say in Wolof, could not been raisa mam, so we say right? So, getting into that process, that formal process, can be a challenge. So there should be other ways of making it adaptable. So we should adapt the system to fit the woman's processes and their needs, as opposed to making sure that they fit. It's the other way around. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So when we put this process together, we should be putting it to adapt to the woman's needs, not having to making the woman, adapt to the situation. Creating that environment where, you coming to the home where, if you need to come to my house, you come to my house, or I come to an environment where I see more other women that are with me, and that I know can will share my point of view, or will understand where I'm coming from. So those are all things that really need to be put in place for the women to come. Yes, overwhelmingly, women are not represented in the witnesses. I think the last statement by the chairman of the TRRC is only about 20% of the witnesses were women, according to the numbers that he gave. About 350 something where witnesses have testified, just over 70 of them were women out of that. So about 20% of that. And when we have, like I said, in almost all the cases, the overwhelming majority of the people dealing with the impact of these violations are the women and the children, of course, and the women represent the children. So therefore, they should be the bulk. The barriers, I mean, now it's not the time to talk about what could have happened. It's the way moving forward. So in terms of reparations also, the policies and procedures have already been set, but we really need to make sure that at the end of the day, when we're going, it's never too late to do something about anything, really. So from going forward, really, we need to make sure that women are, even if they're not physically represented, they are being consulted before the event. If somebody is coming to and this goes not just to the organization, but also to the families, because if you don't involve the woman, your family would be behind. That is a fact. if you have the Khalifa going in and represent a woman without consulting them and knowing, coming together as a family, discussing this issue before going and making representations and making comments and making contributions to whatever you are being asked to contribute towards, it makes it very difficult to come back for the woman to implement at the end of the day and for the family. So really, at the home level, at the family level, at the community level, there should be consultation with the women before they go out and represent the families, because the family is dominantly the woman.
Okay, Aisha.
Yes, I think also one thing that we need to understand is that these women, they've gone through a lot. From the moment that, let's say, their loved one is being enforced disappeared or being killed. So they've lived their life struggling to this point. So I think it's important that, like Auntie Sarah had said, bringing this woman in a form of a focus group discussion also helps a lot. Because most of these women, they can't talk about what happened to them in public, or they can't talk about it, in a place where they're not comfortable talking about it. So it's important creating a focus group discussion, bringing them together, because we've seen in a lot of instances where most of these women, they're now friends. They're more like friends and families. So if you bring them together, because they all went through the same violations, their husbands were extrajudicially killed or enforced disappeared. So sometimes even when they have meetings, they call each other and then they come in as a team. So if you put them in that kind of...
They build a support system of their own among themselves.
So they could build a support system of their own, which will help them to be empowered. Because if somebody is being empowered, the person will be able to stand up for him or herself. So I think these women need to be empowered in a way that they'll be able to juggle with all of these things that they're facing, even at home, even taking up decisions from the extended family, from the extended family. And also communication it's also a barrier to which makes this woman not to come forward. Because like Auntie Sarah said, if you're part of a family and then your husband's brother represents you in issues of your husband, so at some point you feel you've been left out, or you've been neglected, because because your crime is just being a woman. So I think all these are things that as our communities and our society needs to work on, because it's not just happening to these women whose husbands were killed, but then we see it even in our home settings. They would say if the elder of the family speaks, no other woman should speak. So what if the woman has something very important more than what the elder of the family had said?
So the families also have a role to play.
Exactly.
They're guilty sometimes of some of these challenges that women face out there, because the Khalifa just goes out there and just starts talking on behalf of the family without consulting. So that is something we definitely need to revisit and make sure, because to move forward, really, that some of those things need to change. And I wouldn't say it's not the change. It's going to be change for the better, not change for the worse. We're not saying that women should be standing out there. We're not challenging the Khalifa. We're just saying that to make sure that really a family functions properly, all the key elements, all the key stakeholders in that family need to be in on whatever is happening, agreeing on what the family needs are, and agreeing on how to move forward with that. And it's going to be very key in these reparation processes. And it could be the make or break of most families, especially when reparations are monetary and they come into the family, and now it is time to start using those funds for the family. We need to really be concerned about that and look at ways to support the victims and the families and their families in making sure that there's a smooth transition and their lives continue, because they have been living in limbo, so to speak, for so long. And some of these things will now start getting them through getting them further into their process of healing and getting over, or living, we're not getting over, because this is something you will never get over, but starting to live with what has happened in a more dignified way, in a way that is more constructive and positive and moves the family forward, as opposed to being in a state of victimhood that just keeps you in the same spot and keeps you back.
And also, one thing that I'd just like to add, reparations mean differently for victims.
Yes.
So let's say, for instance, this woman in a family, maybe what reparations mean to her doesn't mean, it means differently to the other members of the family.
Absolutely.
The Khalifa of the family could say, I want to be reparated in this kind of way. Let's say I want restitution of what I've lost, or I want justice for my son that was being killed, or my brother who's been killed. But to the woman, she's not satisfied with that as a reparations to her. So all these are things that we really need to consider, because maybe the woman might say, I want the perpetrators who killed my husband to be prosecuted, to take into the court of law. So there would be that tension within the family.
And it's happening right now.
It's happening right now. So there would be that tension within the family to say, okay, so you're just a woman, you can decide on our brother's fate, or you can decide on my son's fate. So I think as families, we need to sit down as a family and have these discussions. It has to be a frank discussion, because if it's not frank, at the end of the day, it's going to be messy. So you give the woman what she deserves as the wife, and then you start these conversations around what is really important in my family as reparations. What do we really need for what we've lost? So all these are things, that discussions that should start now, because if it doesn't start now, at the end of the day, we would see how families would be divided to a point that, you know, these women will feel that I am the one responsible.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
You've just highlighted a very salient point.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we have this transitional justice process is to ensure that we don't have a recurrence of such rights violations. At the end of the day, whatever recommendations the TRRC would make, these two, you know, would have to be catered for. How important is it to also have recommendations that are not only going to protect these women victims, but promote women's rights as well in this country going forward? Let me start with you, Auntie Sarah.
Yes, this is an opportunity. The transitional justice process is an opportunity to do things better. So it's not just about addressing, like you said, addressing what happened before and how do we you know, make amends for that, but also how do we change with the ways forward, and those include system change. It's an opportunity to look at the to look at the gaps, to look at the issues economically, socially. And we've had a lot of these things that we've seen that some of these issues that were the cause of this. Now, how do we change those? How do we empower women more to make sure that they have agency over themselves and are contributing the way that they should contribute, to make sure that you know, there's a balance. When you talk about justice, it's about balance. We need the balance. Without the balance, we can easily slip back to where we are, because what happened in 1994 was an imbalance in one subsector of our society, which was the military, and some imbalances, and that can always prop up somewhere else, whether it is within the families or within the offices or in any space. So we need to make sure that really there's balance. So we really have an opportunity to fix the systems that are in place right now going forward. So whatever we do, we should be looking at how do we better, what is the system like, how can we fix this, make it better, to make sure that these don't happen again. Women's rights, equality, economic empowerment is a very important factor. We're not saying that, you know, all the women should go out to work, but they should be able to really control their economic lives and have a say in their economic lives, and not always be dependent, having this dependency feeling. Even when a woman is usually, most of the time, the woman is the primary provider. The man goes out and brings the depass, but what adds up to that depass, the woman adds up to that depass, most of the time surpasses what the man brings in. So that needs to be recognized, that the woman does have really the economic you know, contribution that the woman does in the household, whether they through selling, through their, you know, osusu and all of those things. That needs to be recognized, that the woman really, and then that needs to also give her that status, that yes, I am equally contributing or as important as the other person. Even if I don't bring in any money, we need to recognize that the work that the woman does in the house, we often discount. I keep on, you know, housewife, like, you know, mom si kër gi la liggéeyut amul njëriñ. that work that is being done, the house cannot function without the work that is being done.
Yeah.
So we really need to recognize the contribution, not necessarily financial contribution, but the other contribution that makes the home work.
Yeah.
Everything we talk about teamwork. The home is a team. Everybody has their contribution. Even the little baby contributes to the house by bringing the joy and and all that thing for the father and the mother, right?
Yeah.
So everybody contributes to the house. So those things really need to be recognized, and we need to have a way of formally recognizing those contributions that women make and not discounting it. And that just doesn't come from the men, but from us women as well. We have been so socialized to think that the work we do in the house is nothing, to the point that we really don't feel that we contribute. If I'm a housewife, I don't feel useful. I only feel useful when I'm bringing financial contribution to the house. But I am as important as my partner, my husband, my spouse, or my brother that is bringing in the financial contribution. That needs to be recognized, and we have to find a way of getting into that system. And socially as well, when it comes to the social part, like I said, we're not challenging the bottom care, but we are saying that without consultation and knowing what the family needs are, as one part of the house, you're not in the home most of the time, so you don't know all the things that are needed in the house. So you consult with the people in the house to know what do you need in the home. So dem marché nga dem jëndi bagage te xamuloo ña lana des lan ngeen am si kër gi ak loo leen amut. It will never be complete. You need to make sure that you consult with ki nekk si kër gi. Lan mo yéet amut lii am na lele amut lii ko defee soo demee marché mu mën a mut.
Dialogue is important.
So it is that communication and the consultation. Then you agree as a family of how you're going to move forward. So those things are things that we need to address in terms of making sure that going forward, really, this balance, this fairness, and this really progress cannot happen. Peace, stability cannot happen unless we have these balances, or we work towards, regulating these imbalances in our societies and as well.
Let me bring in Aisha now.
Yeah, and with this, I think men, they are a contributing factor to all of this, because we live with men in our homes. We have brothers, we have fathers, we have uncles. So I think you need to help these women. You need to help them to be leaders in the house, consulting them, asking them questions. Even if you make a decision, come to them and ask them, what do you think about this decision? Do you think it's okay? They being in the house doesn't mean they can't give concrete contributions or concrete decisions. So I think it's important you consult them, ask them, so that you could also hear what they have to say. But if you as a man in the house, you take all the decisions in the house, and then you feel she's just a woman, so she's just going to be in the house just to cook, take care of the kids. And sometimes we see, even if we have our families, our little ones at home, if a baby cry, they will tell you, Teba Maya. You know what? We've seen all of that.
Yes.
So because we feel women are the ones that needs to be taking care of our kids. No.
It's the caregivers.
It's a teamwork.
Absolutely. All of us men do that. Sometimes I'll tell
and
my
then
wife,
helping the woman, really, for me, it's not about just help. It's not helping it's helping the family.
Exactly.
Because as a man, making decisions about a family, it's a very heavy burden. So consultation, having somebody that you can consult with, that can give other perspective, can really help in making better decisions. Whether it is the man, the woman consulting the man, or the man consulting the woman. In any community, really, team working together, the needs are different, working together, and every bit of those needs are important. Every element of that family is important. Every element of that community is important. To make it work, you really need to get the contribution from all the members. For the wife, whether it's the wife or the mother or the sister or the brother, making a decision about the family should be with the family, coming together. So really consulting the woman is not. It's not something for me. It's not something that a favor. It's a necessity, and it's a right. It is a right. It's not a favor.
All right. At this point, I would like us to switch to the local language for the benefit of our local audience, so they also feel part of this very important conversation we're having here.
We'll try.
So I don't know who would, do Mandinka, and one of you would do Wolof. Waaye mbokk yi ñu fàttali naa ngi toppali di seen programme yi nga xamante ne baaxul leen indil fii week bu nekk ñu ko dooleel di Ictj ak ñi nga xamante la ñoo liggéeyal ci mel ni Victim Center, ANACAD, TRRC, Wave ak yeneen organisation yi nga xamante ne ñoo fi nekk di dooleel jigéen ñi di dooleel tamit ñi nga xamante ne yaaxoon nañ fi seen àq ci biir réew mi. Tey nag maam fii su ñeneen ñaari gan yi nga xamante ne ñu ngi bàyyi ko ANACAD ak Victim Center naa leen bàyyi ñu nuyoo bu ko defee ñoom itamit ñu yaatal waxtaan bi ci kàllaama Mandinka ak lii di wolof ma njëkkee ci Anti Sira.
voilà man dinaa jël olof parce que sama soose moom dafa soriwul so dinaa jël olof bi jërëjëf Eso suñ mbokkee ñoo seetaan yi ñoo déglu di leen jaajëfal si déglu bi ak seetaan bi te di leen santa seen xarit seen mbokk Sira Ndaw moo fi nekk tey jógee ANACAT African Network Against Extrajudicial Killings and Enforced Disappearances ñun suñ liggéey mooy nekk si ñi nga xam ne bi si nguuri jamono njur gi fi jógee seen nit ñi dañ disappear mooy dañ dem kenn xamatul fi ñu nekk wala ñeneen ñi ñu rey leen si anam goo xam ne jaarut si yoon so ñun suñ liggéey si loolu la ñoo yëngu di liggéey ak victime si ñun si suñ boppa ay victime lañ comme ni ma ko waxee si njëlbeen bi ñu tamit suñ family members bokk nañ si ñi nga xam ne dañ leen rey te jaaruñ ko si yoon dëkk bi dëkki loi la lu ñoo def rek even su ki defee lu bon sax dafa war a jaar si loi bi noonu lañ ko war a defee so moo tax du jos Gambie rek mooy loolu internationally àdduna bi yëpp loolu lañ taamu ne loi moo war a dox si dëkk bu nekk te fii nii this country is a country with the rule of law as we say si kàllaama angale so si loolu lañ nekk di liggéey ak si TRRC process bi transitional justice process bi si TRRC bi li ñoo yëngu mooy ne testimony si nga xam ne witness yi ñëw si TRRC bi li ñoo wax ñun dañ ko dee gàttal def ko si kayit def ko si publication ñu circulate ko suñ paree tamit suñ ko si gàttal boobu noonu lu ñu ooyee summaries ñu translate ko def ko si kàllaama angale wolof Fula Soose Pul ak Joola su ko defee ñuy liggéey community radio si comme Sowma radio Bansang Brikama Ba liggéey na ñoom Kerewaan radio ak Cloro fii nii sax ñoom itamit su ko defee ñu jotali ko ñi nga xam ne ñoom du dee am jot parce que kenn amul jot su la TRRC bi rawee witness testimony bi rawee nga dem toog di déglu seetaanaat vidéo yi wala di dégluwaati delluwaati gannaaw si rajo bi yu bari di nga ko mis so loolu si ñoo yëngu la bokka yeneen yi ñoo yëngu si li ñoo yëngu bokka na si dimbale yenn victimes yi nga xam ne bugga dañ pour toppa justice parce que traditional justice process bi du TRRC bi rek dafa yaatu te loolu nguur gi moo ko teg si beginning bi ñoo doot ne bi ñoo doot Truth Commission la ñoo teg prosecution, criminal prosecutions, memorial, all these other non-judicial mechanisms yoo xam ne teg nañ ko so loolu yëpp yoo xam ne lu mun a dem la si transitional justice process bi so am nañ ay victims yoo xam ne liggéey na ñoom ñu file cases si ECOWAS Court of Justice pour ñoom itamit toppa seen axa si wàlla googu parce que leena lu ma waxutoon si njëlbeen bi when it comes to enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killing mooy ne dëgg la nguuri Gambia sign nañ international elements yi nga xam ne ñi ñiit yi pour enforce disappearances waaye da ngaa gis ne enforce disappearances nekkul si suñu loi bi locally soo bëggee fii nii yóbbu nit ne ko su ma nit dafa disappear amuñ nuñ laa chargé si suñ court system bi fii nii mooy ne pour bu delluwaat ko si anglais rek mooy ne we have signed up to the conventions, international convention on enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings, but it has not been domesticated. Ben tey suñ nguur gi Minister of Justice ñu ngi see liggéey waaye fi mu nekk nii koo xam ne dañ la caajoo ne la yow kii da nga disappear kii wala da nga ko rey extrajudicially amuñ loi boobu noonu si suñ biir Gambia fii nii so li bu ko mun a aate so option bi nga am rek mooy pour dem international courts te loolu dimbale nañ si ay victims yoo xam ne ñu ngi taxaw si loolu am na si yeneen ak yeneen yoo yëngu waaye xam naa ne waxtu du ñu may pour ñu mun a baamtuwaat yooyu noonu yëpp so si gàttal loolu la ñoo yëngu
waaye loolu am na solo dinaa dugal léegi Aïcha moom itamit mu nuyoo wax ñu tuuti ci liggéey bi ñoo def pour suñ mbokk yi nga xam ne ñooy seetaan te ñu déggal lii di Mandinka.
Assalamu alaikum eso abaraka bake ntelong Ictj jameti mbe do ko ke kan Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations ndul fanan ning victim wala ka do ko ke na organisation o commencé da covering 2017 so na do ko bumma babe mu ka cases or document ka victims o la mini alon ko nyin ko late kan sanji mo nim fulo kono Gambia kono jang mini alon ko ye faale mini alon ko ye tajire ya ko ke gal kan so nka wala la cases ulta anke document anim fanan ka awareness raise around human rights violations ko mini alon ko keta jang ko ngajele ko mol dol bi jere nyin ko late kan ne bari mam findi nan no pour canadian ka foko nyini ne kete kan so ka o documentation o min ke sa mbirin tiara si lota nga database soto so nin TRRC kanyin documents all share parce que TRRC to le sembo soto le itol mo act of parliament le timi yalon ko man sa kunale fango yalon di ka fuko ning mini yalon ko nyin ko late kan nin tiara si le nyanda kela ko wol jibe ka kisi
luwale sembo
luwale sembo dila so bari ntol mo organization civil society organization olte bari ni ka do ko kele ka je ko ntol nga cases ol mini document nga dila ito leo cases ol jibe ye wirife ya jibe ni atara itol nyanta ka wo mol kumandi ito leo further investigation okay o molta yene kele yena TRRC ifanang ye cases ol dol fanantali ye o document yi fangole nka fenko fanan kele nga partners ol fanan soto le mini yalon ko nika do ko ke mini yalon ko ifanan transitional justice work ka wala ke coming anti-tyrannical organization aneket Ictj fanan nika do ko kele UNDP aning ning Jame to Justice fanan wo fanan mo mbota amu kafolti mi yalon ko itol nata nyokane pour kaje ko Jame to Justice wayeke ibe Ghana dolbe Ghana Jame to Justice fanan bijane IHRDA fanan wala Institute of Human Rights and Development wol fanan mu do ko la lati mi yalon ko fanan be nyin transitional justice mechanism so sembentu yakan so ñunum be mo organizational ti mi yalon ko ni ka do ko ke anim fanan ka psychosocial support fanan victim ol mako through psychosocial support anim fanan medical support fanan pakar ko ngajele ko especially mini alon ko ye soron ne nung ye tocho aning witch hunt mini alon ko ye nyin kube jaro dilale ya min ay kono fengol beta ay tinya so nka jibele nka jin kewol mako e nyamen through medical support pour ye jaralo so because jaralo kuma yata bakere kata ko momi yalon ko ye soron nyin kol be late kan sain wala nit sol mo muneti jaralo pour ye jaralo so to isaje se kende yano kata ko momi yalon ko alafta ka tonya soto ni wa manjata kende ya soto ani na hage do fana man sabati ate ñin kuudol fana wol bebi na tardelale bari nala jata ken diabe correct ring a hakilo be sabetering asin kuudol be folono isaje min lata kan isaje wol be setalano so ndolla do kudula time jama soto nga dandi woto isaje kuudol bi jense wol fana kacano
okay abaraka baki Aisha adisira li ñu waxtaane tay moy xam nañ ne TRRC bi nan ñu ngi def seen liggéey yéen tamit seen mbootaay yéen a ngi see jàppa waaye gannaaw bi nga xamante ne TRRC li leen appal su demee ba jeex seen liggéey jeex dina am recommendation yoo xamante ne ñoom it dinañ ko jox nguur maanaam xelal leen ci jéego yi ñu jël pour gis ne ñi nga xamante ne war am ndàmpaay ñu am ndàmpaay ñi nga xamante ne yaa seen àq te ñu bëgg a dem fi mbax na doonee benn pour sàkku ji ndimbal foofu ñoom itamit ñu mun faa dem waaye xam nañ ne li ëpp ci ñi nga xamante ne dañoo daanu woon seen kaw wala sax ñi nga xam ne ñoo gën a yëg coono bi ay jigéen lañ li ñoo waxtaane mooy njëriñ bi nga xamante ne moo nekk ci ñu bàyyi xel jigéen ñi gannaaw bi nga xamante ne TRRC mu ngi def mu ngi bind recommendation si mu war a def
ci jërëjëf Ansoumana so comme ni nga ko waxee rek li ëpp doole si ñi nga xam ne ñoom lañ fi seen àqay seen rights dañ ko violate ak ñoo xam ne ñoo si gën a ñoom la gën a affect mooy jigéen ñi rawatina si ñun liggéey bi ñoo def si ñu yëngu mooy ñi nga xam ne dañ leen jël ñu arrest leen ñu dem xamatuñ fan lañ nekk wala ñoo xam ne dañ leen rey te jaaraluñ ko si yoon ëpp doole googu yëpp ay góor lañ góor ñi lan lañ bàyyi gannaaw ay maam ay yaay ay jabar ak seen doom yi ndaw mi ñu bari doom yu ndaw te ñi ko seetloo 1994 ba tey yàgg na am na ñu bari jigéen ñu bari since 1994 ñu ngee dem through loolu so ñun suñu wàll si li ñoo liggéey jigéen ñoo si ëppa so pour bàyyi leen xel loolu am na solo lool parce que doore ko 1994 ba léegi yaa ngi struggle sa borom kër nekkaatu fa ëpp doole yu bari jigéen ñu bari ñoom neen la benn tey di amatuñ borom kër ba since booba wala suñu amee borom kër tamit sa benn tey ay jafe-jafe lañ see jëlee njaboot gi ñu ngi ndaw ñu ngi leen toppatoo ba léegi fi ñu toll nii so am na solo lool pour ñu bàyyi si xel jigéen ñi te soo ko seetloo tamit jigéen ñi balaa situation bi ñëw sax dañ nekk situation balaa yii di xew sax dañ nekk situation boo xam ne ñu ngi doon already struggle soo si boolee lu mel nii daf leen di gën a delloo gannaaw te àdduna bi yëpp seet ne 51% of the population mooy téeméer bu nekk juróom fukk ak benn bi jigéen la loolu tamit Gambia same trend baa fi nekk te ñu demee noonu soo leen bàyyee gannaaw rek muy mel ni daa ngee bàyyi réew gannaaw yaa ngee bàyyi àdduna bi gannaaw am na solo lool pour ñu bàyyi leen xel rawatina su ñëwee si mbiri dampaay su ñëwee si faana googu da ngaa gis ne ñun suñ liñ xam fii nii mooy ne ki da ngaa jiital kilifa muy dem di la représente muy dem si di meeting yeeg si dem di taxaw ba pare suñu dara ñëwee kilifa gi la ñoo oo teg wax ak moom kilifa yooyu noonu soo ko seetloo ñuy génn noonu yëpp ëpp doole yëpp ay góor la dee nekka du ñuy jiital jigéen ñi ñu nekk si kanam mooy raka daati raka nijaay ji wala mag bu góor bi wala mag bu jigéen mag bu raka bu góor bi ñooy dem taxawal ne représente famille su ko defee jigéen ñi ñu bàyyi leen gannaaw jigéen ñooñu pour xam seen ñoom seen liñ soxla ay sa wax na lu am solo si gannaaw si angale mooy ne suñu waxee ay dampaay nekkul ne ñëpp ku nekk dampaay xaalis la bëgg wala ku nekk de am na ki wenn jigéen ku ma doon waxal moom li ma wax rek mu ne ma man dama bëgg a xam rek fu suma jëkkër nekk ak la na ko dal man loolu rek laa bëgg aw ma interest si xaalis aw ma interest si leneen loolu laa bëgg loolu man moo ma gën a soxal so ku si nekk ak sa dampaay dafa uti nekkut ne war loolu am solo la pour ñu war koo nekk di ko pour ñu gën koo xamal ni ñu ne dampaay buñ ne dampaay duñ ne rek jël xaalis te ko si loxo wala def ko si enveloppe ñëw jox la parce que xaalis du delloo si ki fi jógee li la dal xaalis mënu koo wécci di xaalis bu am na solo lool nag moom bu leen doon ngeen mi roon am na solo lool parce que xaalis su ñëwut tamit si coono ngaa dika parce que yu bari xale ñu seen doomi jaay seen jànga yàqu na muy seen kër yi tasaaroo na ñàkk nañ seen kër ñàkk nañ seen alal ñàkk nañ lu bari soo xaalis am na si solo lool waaye du xaalis du yëpp so loolu yëpp lu ñu war a bàyyi xel la si jigéen ñi naka lañ ñoom itamit seen fuñ taxaw ak seen lan lañ seen soxla naka la demee buñ leen bàyyi gannaaw leneen lu si gën a am solo mooy ne transitional justice process bi ñu nekk du de affaire yi rek gëstu li de li xewoon démb ak lan naka la xewee pour ñu mën a xam lan la but also ëllëg ak si biir naka la ñoo make sure ne lii du fi xewati so am na solo lool pour loolu bañ a xew ñu make sure ne comme ni ñoo waxee justice mooy balance ñoo xam ne dafa war a em dara lu ëpp rek tuuru loolu dafa war a em soo lu ñu emale boobu noonu ëllëg ak si biir naka lañ ko defee mu gën nga xam ne dina gën a yokk gën a suñ société bi gën a setul loolu yëpp lu am solo la pour mun a bàyyi xel comme ni ma ko waxee jigéen ñi ñoo fi ëppa 51% àdduna bi 51% Gambie so bàyyi leen xel ak de fact tamit ne si ñi nga xam ne ñoom si ñi nga xam ne ñi si gënoon a sonna si lii xew si jamono jiñ passé ni si lañ bokk jigéen ñi ñoo si ëppa
Aisha ngalan ko tiaral si nila doko banta nyanta recommendation so saferal pour commencer ko na yamari nyanta men kala parce que dol bijele la na fulol tinyata dol bije yara nyantol tinya ak mum kum maya ko le bije pour ka joko musol fanan ye dabula nyin recommendation kon
okay akumaya tabakele pour musol daye bul kafuje kare ko ngajibe nga example ota min yalon ko ye kemal fa minu fata 1994 ani enforces appearances mo jama bi je ye musol le tuje ye musol tije musol fanan e dimbayal tuy bulu so saying akumaya tabake pour nyi musol ni atara recommendation obi nakela ikana ke idam mangol je ye nani musol kan ye nyininka ka foye ko altol kato ko ni ko ning e ka fanyadele jusu nyabrang wala reparation o maybe ni ente nyininka mimo reparation like reparation o nde lafta munela pro reparation nsa foye no lafta kodole la bari antisira nyininka antisira a lafta munela reparation asa foye ko nde lafta le de mi yenke ma fa ya kitinde wo yemusu do fana nyininka fananse kuma do foy so a different ale molie a min tantele minna amam min antisira la wala so akumaya tale bake purunga murun nyimusol kan ke nyininka altol juso nyaburango mune ba altol juso nyabula purun nyin ko min latal kan al juso e nyabu wo be kumaya tale bari nimma oke for ninga minu yalon ko e kataka nyim family so represent famal lombang baringol lombang koto mal lombang ni woltata itol yamira mimmo reparation od itol be wala folaje kato ko ini musol mandiyam minu ke mal fungo fat ini wol mandiyam itol tata e fangaleje pour ka family represent so kumaya tale bakke pour ka nyim musol console ini e diamu ya jibe mi yalon ko ay tol be nafa hana ma musoda ma nafa de bari mi yalon ko ay muso nafa aya dingol nafa ay dimbayal be nafa isaje itol be sitano wala isaje cool sita nyama bari ni wo manke rek fenko binalale ika fanyade issues binalale tening issues nata mbalanta minna mi yalon ko wala ketano wala bina buruna jankoteke antiarrc ila fenko nyin never again campaign nyin coming minu keta nunjang sanji mwani mfulo kon akana ke koteke so nyanta kan kata dango kele ngaje ko nyin kuol minu keta no nkana murunga kan koteke
abaka bake
sama bala ñoo dem rek sama ko bëggoon a leen lu am solo rek xam naa ne waxtu bu ñoo jaamu si waaye leen lu am solo ñu ma bëgg ñu always fa leeral mooy ne rights yi miinu ne soo amee benn rek doo am beneen bi suñ la joxee xaalis doo mun a yóbbu ki jos doo mun a am justice loolu lu jar a leeral la ñeneen dañ dee fonda suñ leen joxee xaalis amatuñ right pour dee bu court wala amatuñ right pour ñu def investigations or anything loolu moom TRRC war nañ see def effort pour ñu xam ne xaalis biñ la war a suñ la joxee xaalis loolu luñ la war a jox la justice bi amul dara pour defa xaalis mun ngaa topp tamit justice bi ki nga xam ne moo la tooñ ñu yóbbu ko fa mbaxana nekkee benn moom tamit
compensation
loolu yëpp right boo xam ne la right si yooyu yëpp sa right la
waaye crime bi nga xamante ne
crime bi ceeñu ko te soo baalalee nit tamit tax minute ne soo baalalee nit nguur gi duñ ko yóbbu court so loolu yëpp dafa loolu jara leeral la lu ñu war a xam ne réparation bi suñu réparation wala reconciliation wala forgiveness wala yóbbu prosecution yooyu noonu yëpp individual lañ bu si nekk dafa utteeg morom ka boo amee bi nekku de soo jëlee bi daf laa xañ beneen bi yëpp mun naa ànd
yaakaar naa loolu leer na abraka baki Aisha abraka anti Sira time bi jeex na tak I'm afraid that is all that time permits so I would allow you to say your final words and then you know maybe not final words because we may come back here again but you know we would you know say a word or two and then take a leave of you.
Just encouraging the Gambian population to be part of the process because this is our process. We cannot leave it to others. We cannot just sit back and wait for somebody else to speak on our behalf. We need to speak now or forever hold our peace, as the saying goes. We need to be part of the process. We cannot ignore it. We cannot we cannot pretend that it doesn't exist or just hope that things will fall into place. And particularly the women, we need to come out and make sure that we are not waiting for somebody to speak on our behalf as well. It is very important. I know that we understand all the challenges that come, the stigma and all the social elements that come into it. But we need to come forward and we need to be part of the process.
All right, Aisha.
Thank you very much, Eso. So my final word is I'm calling out to Gambians as a whole, especially the government of the Gambia, because we are looking to them. TRC will be wrapping up its work soon, and then they will start writing their recommendations. And these recommendations will be taken to the government of the Gambia. So I'm calling out to the government, especially the National Assembly members as well, since the TRC will be taken to the National Assembly. I'm calling out to them, especially the Committee on Human Rights. Let them make a good choice to make sure that these recommendations will not be thrown out.
All right.
Because victims are relying solely and wholly on this DRC recommendation.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Auntie Sarah.
Thank you.
We appreciate your coming, and we look forward to engaging you more, hopefully some other time. Until then, from us here, we say bye-bye. Thank you for watching.